Welcome to where the screen door slams and the coffee mug hits the table. You're listening to The Family Balancing Act with me, Maureen Huntley, mom, grandmother, and board-certified holistic and functional medicine health coach. Each episode will explore the realities of your day-to-day family life in this modern era of nonstop texts, memes, and technology. After all, how do we keep ourselves sane and our family healthy? I'll have amazing guests and thought-provoking discussions, and we'll take a holistic look at family health, emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual. Whether it's a micro perspective of family involving healthy snacks, teenagers with an attitude, stressed out husbands, partners, adult children, potty training, elder care, grandchildren, college prep, or a macro perspective of world events, including flu, earthquakes, the brainwashing media, finances, and oh, so much more. We'll find a way together. So take a deep breath, exhale, and know that you're not alone. Bring on the Family Balancing Act. Welcome to the Family Balancing Act, where restoring the heart and art of motherhood starts with one conversation at a time. I'm Maureen Huntley, your host, board-certified integrative, holistic, and functional medicine health coach, emotional freedom technique practitioner, mom, grandmother, wife, and CEO of My Family's Home Operations. So come on in, grab a chair, grab a tea, a coffee, green juice, and let's talk. So many threads make up all of our choices, stories, our experiences, joys, loves, and struggles, creating the most magnificent tapestry filled with colors of emotion and textures of happiness and pain. These sleek and tattered threads that are both old and new are mine and yours. We all have this masterpiece of a tapestry of experiences showing a life lived, the fabric of our humanity, wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Virtues. Yet in this human world, we judge ourselves and yes, others for their choices of what is right, wrong, good, or bad. Really, it's not ours to judge, including our own stuff. It's God's. So reflect, pray for forgiveness and a path forward. In my opinion, the hardest critic to overcome is our own, the stuff that we play over and over in our heads. I shoulda, woulda, coulda. For the story that happened 20, 30, 40 plus years ago. Have you ever noticed that the very thing you've been ruminating about shows up from family, friends, neighbors, and even coworkers when they decide to recount a story that involves a little bit of your story or the shame of your secret that very few people know about, maybe nobody knows about, but someone recounts the story of another person that made a similar choice you did. And there ensues a conversation about that being such a poor decision. And you feel it. Women and their babies, so many stories. So many women all over the world have given up their babies, choices that they didn't want to make. They gave them up for adoption, or maybe they had an abortion, but they didn't want to do it. And no truer than this is in Ireland. In episode 104 of the Family Balancing Act, I had a big discussion with author and birth mother advocate Ethna Ring regarding the veil that has finally been lifted through the work of Tusla Child and Family Agency. There's also the Mother and Baby Homes Commission investigation in Ireland that was published in January 2021. So the movement to clear, to have the names and the mothers and the children united and reunited is working. The supposed church, though, guided situations that these young mothers to be and the mothers and their children, what they had endured was horrific. Using God as the reason for damnation for these women was, for being just human, was inhumane. And somehow the birth of a baby, a gift from God, is sinful. Yet that twists the mind. For you see, it all needed to be hidden because when it's hidden, it'll just go away. The shame and the loss of these birth mothers is a lifetime journey. And I believe it's generational. Sometimes in life, we come to a fork in the road where every choice can lead to heartbreak. Occasionally, the thorny path we choose ultimately leads to a happy ending. Thomas Gorman. In this episode of the Family Balancing Act, I am so very, very honored to have the authors of I Called Her Mary, a memoir, Margaret O'Hagan and Thomas Gorman. We are also so very blessed to have Mary Bowler, joining us here on the Family Balancing Act. Their story, their mother's story, and birth mother's story, and mother-in-law's story and memoir is one of faith, hope, and love. In I Called Her Mary, Peg O'Hagan recalls, as told by her son-in-law Thomas Gorman, the heart-rending story of giving her baby daughter away, only to be reunited with her. Yes, reunited with her 50 years later and a continent away. As an unwed teen in the 1950s, Catholic Ireland, Peg was faced with keeping the daughter she loved dearly or giving her baby a chance to escape a life of ridicule and ostracism. This story provides inspiration to all the separated mothers and children searching for each other. It is also a love story between Peg and the man who saved her when she came to America. Peg's tale of hardship and unconditional love carry the reader through to the end. I absolutely love this book. You can feel it in your heart. So I cannot wait to introduce you to Peg, Thomas, and Mary. It is an absolute honor to have you here today. And I just love your story. I can so relate to it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Just unmute yourselves there.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
It was beautiful. You're making me cry already.
I know. I'm like,
Oh, please. I really, this book is amazing on so many levels. There's so much information, and I absolutely love the all of the research you've done. Also, it's not only the story, but it's the backing of the story. You've done a lot of work. So why don't we do a little round table here and everybody tell a little bit about themselves and a little bit about your background. So Tom, how about I start with you?
So Tom Gorman, I'm an educator. I'm now a superintendent of schools in Northeast New Jersey. And, this story came out several years ago, and we kept on sitting around talking about, like, someone should write it down, someone should write it down. And everybody's like looking at each other and nobody's going to do it. But I had a history background and I enjoy this kind of stuff. So I started, writing down some of the notes, but Peg didn't want to tell the story. Peg just didn't want to share the pain again. She spent a whole lifetime trying to forget it. But finally, after her husband, Mick, passed, she finally had the courage and finally said, let's do this. Let's share it. And originally it was just for the family. And we were just going to do this as a family legacy, so the grandkids and so on can know about this. But then as friends and neighbors heard about this, they wanted a copy. We gave them a copy, and then it just grew and grew and grew. And that's what brings us today to this podcast. So thank you for having us, Maureen.
So honored, really and truly. So Maggie, why don't we go with you next?
Me, Maggie, or the other Maggie?
Okay, now we're going to do this. All right.
All right, I'm Maggie. I'm going to go with Maggie. My sister's Mary. We're going to do that. We'll distinguish it. I'm Maggie Gorman, and my gorgeous husband is the one who wrote the book, and the amazing woman is my mother, Peg O'Hagan. So I know there's a lot of Pegs and Margarets and Marys and stuff. So my mom is the Margaret O'Hagan on the book with my husband. I am Margaret Gorman now, but Margaret O'Hagan Gorman. And it's just an honor to talk to you. And we're so grateful for your beautiful introduction. And anytime we get to talk about my parents is an honor and a blessing, because they were the greatest. And I'm just privileged to be a part of all of it, and privileged to be their daughter. And the more we talk about it, there was more pride and love because of her journey, and I'm just amazed that this is a thing, because she just lived her life every day like that, and not even knowing that she was a hero every day. And then for everybody to experience it, I always said that in my life, that the more people my mother knew, the better this world would be. So she's still spreading her magic, and I'm just honored to be here. So thank you.
Maggie, thank you so much for sharing that. Mary.
What made me follow all those people? Oh my gosh. My name is Mary Bowler. I am the Mary in the book. I'm a retired teacher now, and I taught in Catholic schools all my life. When this all occurred, it's just a miracle to me. I mean, it's like a story. I get around in my daily life and I'm doing my thing, and then I sit down and I go, holy moly, this really happened to us. And it's a very rare story, I believe, and it's all because of my mother. And finding her 50 years later, after my mom passed, Dorothy, after she had passed, found some paperwork, and the rest is history. And it's unbelievable how I have been accepted into this family. I always say I fell into a real pot of gold when I found these guys. So it's just a miracle. And Peg and Mick are just, I feel blessed and honored that I got to connect with them at the time we did. And this family is unbelievable. So always willing to tell this beautiful story. And as always, I thank my brother-in-law. He took it and ran, and he just did a fabulous job. So glad to be with you, Maureen, today.
Oh, well, so honored, truly. And this story is one that has been told in many different versions, as we chatted about briefly before we went to record. But so many times women have their children out of wedlock, and the shame and the blame and the horrific situation around not being good enough, and just being a part of the throwaway society, not only as the mother, but the child, even when they're detached. But now today in Ireland, there's so many organizations trying to pull together these women to meet with their children. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it works out for a little while and it doesn't. And then sometimes it doesn't work out in the beginning at all. And then it works out beautifully in the end. And we're all just humans banging into each other, but it's great to have a resolve. And your resolve is beautiful. I know my resolve is beautiful. Ethna Ring's resolve was beautiful. So in writing this story, in really you really grabbed everything Peg had said. Every, her languaging, her swearing, her being real Irish. I was like, I totally related. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. What was it like to sit opposite this amazing woman, get her to finally, when she agreed to it, to like get her going?
So, when you look back at your life, you don't think about it was anything that was that amazing. You just do it. She was just like, you just lived, you just move on. Everything just keeps moving forward. So when we actually sat and you had to ask the questions, she starts to remember. And we sat in our living room, we built a fire and we would talk and just have a casual conversation.
With a cup of tea?
With a cup of, yeah, we did. We had the tea and everything. Absolutely. And it just occurred over many, many months. And then I would ask her the same question over time, just to make sure there was consistency so she would remember everything correctly. And she was, straight as anything with her stories and remembering. So the stories started coming out and, you have to probe different ways to get different stories and figure out the best. And then I would go out to Chicago and I would interview Mary, or when Mary was out here and I would interview her, and then I would get her story a little bit. And, you start putting together, and then I transcribed the story, and then it all just started coming together. But as for the language, yes, I had to cut out some of the swears too. There was just too many with the way she talks. But
I love it.
But the difficult part was also, I had two voices. So you had Mary's voice and Peg's voice. And me being the writer, my voice would slip in there. And I had to be very conscious of that and try to pull it out. And there was many times I would say, no, that's what I would say. And I had to extract that and then make sure I was being true to the two people that were telling the story.
Wow. I could see where that would be hard, but I really felt that she was in the room with me, and Mary, you were there. As I read through it, I was bawling my eyeballs out at times, just not even separated from my own story. The path she walked was really hard.
Right.
And God bless her. She really came out strong. And you had an amazing father, Maggie.
I did. We've all, all of our families, we all have our stuff, right? Everybody has our stuff, but my dad is and was my hero, as long as also with my mom. And, we look back too as adults, as wives and husbands and mothers. And there's just such another appreciation for all that they went through. And then you have to appreciate the time that it was all happening too. We can all be very critical of how life has evolved now. But when you're talking about the 1950s and then getting married in 1960 and those circumstances that we may look at a little bit like easier now to do, even though there's still a stigma to it, at that time, for my dad to accept it and my mom to trust him to take that story, again, all those different choices, for my grandmother in Ireland to tell my mom, trust them, don't start your life on a lie and a secret, is beyond wise, because that's the game changer. That's the game changer of our whole destiny, of our whole life, and the foundation of my parents' marriage too. That he protected her and she trusted him with that, and it was never thrown back in her face. And my dad would always say, sorry, I'm in a basement.
That's all right. No worries.
I'm a teacher in a basement. This is the only quiet place, and the timer goes off. So I apologize. So every 10 minutes, I'm going to be doing that. But my father and mother were amazing. And like I said, as a mother now and as a wife, you see that respect and that honor of that, and the protection that he always had of her. And, I always knew my mom had a hole in her heart before she even told me about my sister. There was always that place for my sister that never went away, rightfully so. So to get this gift to have my sister in our life literally filled my mom's heart, made it whole. And nobody deserved it more than her.
Maureen, you talk about choices. You said before about the thorny, fork in the road, and we all come to those. So, when Peg made the choice to come to America, her parents chose to accept her. She meets Mick. Mick chooses to accept her and start their life together. You move down the road, and then Mary chooses to go and try and find her birth mother. So these are all choices. Any one of them could have just totally destroyed the story, and it would have stopped with a dead end. But these are all conscious choices that people made, and they were very brave choices. So that's what makes the story so beautiful.
And really meant to be, just totally meant to be.
Totally. I just, as you say, the bravery to step into it and to just go with it is remarkable. So, Mary, what was it that made you step into that path to really trust?
Right. It was, I knew that, the whole thing, because we know in the book, I knew I was adopted. A lot of things came along in my life. I was getting married, so I needed my birth certificate, didn't have that. So we've got, I'm going up to my parents asking for some documentation of some sort. And as we went on, my dad was, he goes, we're related because, I have a an uncle from Ireland. So we've got to be related sometime. My adopted dad, and so I go, Dad, we're related somehow. That's, and then Mom was more tentative. She was like, why do you want to, I just would ask questions, Mom, do you have any more about my, my adoption? And she goes, why do you want to know? And I go, Mom, you're my mom. I had to always, verify that with her. I think she was scared, probably scared that all of a sudden I'm going to go off. And I never, ever had that intention. It was just a child interest, And then all of a sudden she passed. And of all people, my brother comes up, Harry comes up with me with, I found this, it's Dad's, writing. And it was all my documentation except for my birth certificate. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's my passport. And then my head started ticking and thinking. And all of a sudden my husband comes up. He goes, why don't we arrange a trip to Ireland with the kids, my 2 children, and let's just go see if we can find out. Maybe she's still there. And I'm going, okay, absolutely, let's go. And, went in July of '08 and didn't know these little guys were there in March of '08. All as a family going to see Mom's where she lived. And at that time, her brother was alive, living in the same house. And so we ended up going there and met Sister Mary, helped us. You can't run from it. And so she helped us just beautifully. We found out a little bit more information. And then went back, never found her in Ireland. They tried. Sister called me and said, we can't find her, and Sister contacted the English, in England, her brother in England. And then I started getting excited. I go, well, this isn't, going to go anywhere. But I was in her homeland. I went back to Ireland with my kids. So it was wonderful. So anyway, in November-ish, I think, November, all of a sudden I get a 6 a.m. call from Sister Mary. And she goes, hello. And I go, Sister Mary? Like that. She goes, oh, I think I found your mom. I go, what? 6 a.m. I hadn't had coffee or anything, and, told me
you needed a drink then, not coffee.
And she said she got a hold of my mom and asked her if it was okay to give me her number. And she said yes. And I guess she asked Peg, she goes, do you know why I'm calling you? She goes, is my Mary looking for me? So I was like, I think Mary's looking for me, And she said, yes, she is. And Mom gave her permission to give me the number. Of course, they had to go to work. So I'm like all day, I'm screaming at school. I'm telling my 8th graders they think I'm insane, they're like, okay, 8th graders. And so I went home that night and I called her and you read all the interrogation I went through with Mick, which was awesome.
He did the right thing. He really did. He
was so
honed in and just clearing you so that you're not a nutcase.
Absolutely. Like I'm not a creeper coming in, And then she's on the phone with me. She goes, let me talk to her, And then the journey from there was unbelievable. I said, I just wanted to know what you did was right. I'm good. I'm fine. You know, you have 2 new grandchildren, and she's crying. She goes, I've been waiting 50 years to hear this. And I said, I'd love to meet you. And she goes, oh, I want to see you again. And here we go. And Maggie, well, my daughter just happens to be turning 40 in January. How's that sound? You know? I said, sounds great. And then it started, and there was Mick. Remember that, Mags? I turned the corner, and he's got these flowers for me. And, you know, just gave me a big hug. And, oh, he was very emotional, very emotional. So from there on, like Maggie said, it just went crazy. I mean, they're all saying I look like her, I walk like her. You know, they were all making fun of me. So it was good. It was awesome. It's like I'd always been there. So it was wonderful.
That is just so beautiful, and I love that. I know the first time that my mother met her birth daughter.
Oh,
her daughter was like just as it was very emotional, and my father only found out about 24 hours in advance.
Wow.
And it was my mom, she lived like another 3 months, but it was one of those things that the story had to move forward. We had to make this happen.
Absolutely.
And my father was just as gracious as your dad, which was just beautiful, because he was like, my mother was always afraid of telling him because, and this is where, for us, the big secret was that, she never told anybody. So she carted the stuff around all the time. Whereas, Peg didn't do that. She actually stood in her truth and knew she could lose the man of her dreams, but she stayed true to herself and true to God and true to who she needed, who she was. And she did that. Whereas my mother stayed true to herself, but her truth was that everybody leaves me. They'll be pulled away from me. He'll leave me. And that was the last thing that man would ever do. With that interlude there, Maggie, when you found out your sister's name, Mary, but wasn't Mary, that wasn't her name through her childhood, what were your thoughts around that?
I thought it was hysterical. I thought, you can't make this up. There's 5 names in Ireland that everybody uses, and that's it. And I just thought it was crazy, because the reality of it, though, Maureen, is that her name was Maggie and her husband's name is Tom, and she was a teacher. And I'm like, and that's the first thing my mom tells me on the phone, because after she got off the phone with my sister, I called her. I said, how'd it go? And my mom was kind of not really digesting everything, but that's what she said. She's like, well, her name is Maggie, her husband's name is Tom, and she's a teacher. And I was like, Mom, are you kidding me right now? And she's like, what? I go, Tom, Maggie, and a teacher. And she's like, oh my God. And she starts screaming, Mickey, did you understand that? Like, you just can't make it up. It's a bad movie. It's an Irish
movie.
Yes, it is, but it's funny, but it makes sense. And my sister's just so gracious that my mom did ask her, like, is it okay if we call you Mary? Like, that's what I named you. And we already have a Maggie. We already have a Margaret. Like, it just make things easier. That's basically what it was. There was no real sentiment to it. It was just like, it makes things easier if we can call you Mary, if that's okay with you.
Business.
Right. So
this is how we do it.
So to be honest with you, there has been no jealousy or anything. I told you that was going to happen.
No worries. Just keep talking.
My husband is cringing, by the way. My husband is cringing that this is happening.
Something tells me he's dealt with things like this before.
A little bit, but now it's public, Maureen, so now everybody knows. But
secrets here.
Exactly. There's just where there hasn't been any jealousy, and it's just not my nature to. I've always just been very grateful, and stemming from my parents. There's no need to be jealous of anything. You be grateful for what you have, and you be happy for others. And what a gift. I mean, one, I have a sister, and two, she filled my mother's heart. Like, she literally made my mother's heart whole. And she's beyond amazing, my sister, beyond. And when people say that we're alike, and we are, it's the biggest compliment to me, because you could just watch her and she's amazing. She's amazing. And there's nothing but beauty coming out of her. And she's just like our mom. She's just like our mom. So, like, you can't deny any of us
that, and
that we were meant to be together, and that our journeys were supposed to be this way. Because I would say to my mom, because as you know through the book, my mom did share that story with me when I was going through some 20-year-old stuff. And my mom shared that story with me to kind of put me in my place in a positive way. As, you know, my mom's sayings of, like, you know, if everybody put their problems in a pile, you'd grab yours and run. And when I was going through my stuff, she shared that with me, and it kind of put me in my place, like, okay, now I'm going to take care of my mom. Like, my stuff is here, and she's helping me to heal by sharing that. And then we just had that 20-year relationship of talking about my sister. Do you want to find her, Mom? What do we do? And how do you feel? And it was, I'm sure it was a great outlet for her to have between us, just yet another bond, because she was literally my best friend, my best friend in the world. And we were able to share those good and bad and hard times. And the story just kind of reaffirms everything that she shared with me over that time frame of opening up to me. So there's no room for anything but joy and gratitude. There's just no room for it. And that's my little love fest for my sister.
I love it. And growing up, did you ever ask your mom for a sister? Did you ever? I mean,
probably. Probably I was just like such a tomboy, because I was the youngest in my three brothers, and I just wanted to do everything that they did and wanted to be everywhere that they were. And I was such a pain in the butt. I always say to them, I don't know how they love me as much as they do, because I was a nightmare. I just was relentless, relentless. But of course I would say, like, why am I the only girl? Or, you know what I mean? Just kind of stuff like that. But it wasn't prominent, because again, it's like, this is our life. Because my mom had miscarriages too. My mom had 5 miscarriages.
Yeah.
So I knew also, like, to be grateful that I was even alive.
Right. Because
so who the hell am I to be like, well, where's another baby? Because my mom almost died having the other babies. So again, it was never like, I wish, but of course you wonder. Of course you always like imagine and wonder. And then when it happened, and then I get hurt. It's like, are you crazy right now?
Well, and I feel bad, Tom, I'm leaving you out. One more question for Mary. Mary, did you want a sister growing up? Did you ever think about how you wanted a sister?
Absolutely. Because I had my brother, and there's a 13-year difference between me and my brother. And I'm 81 now, so, and then I go, I absolutely want a sister. So, God help the women that were in my life that, like my friends and stuff. I go, you're like a sister to me. And I was a nerd. I was terrible. And then going right back at Margaret, and I end up waiting. The wait was well worth it. Well worth it. This woman, her heart and her soul is with everybody that knows her. She's unbelievable. When I first came in, I have never heard, this is my half sister. Even for my brothers. It just didn't happen. The weekend I came in, they went by, and they're scratching my head and they're kissing me and they're going, I love you. That's my sister. She's from Chicago. You should see everyone in the room. What? Sister, never have. And Mom was a riot, because she loved playing with people's minds after were established, and I'd come in and visit. We'd be at breakfast, and someone come up, and Mom goes, it's my daughter, Maggie. Yeah, she's from Chicago. All of them know this Maggie, and I'm going, oh no, she's going to say it. All of a sudden, she's illegitimate. She'd say it at the breakfast table. And I would be like, yes, I'm alive. I know it's illegitimate. I mean, she would just freak them out, because they knew Maggie. And they go, well, that's not Maggie. And I go, it's the other one. She was so proud and she wanted to tell everybody.
Well,
And,
it's that. Yeah, she was just, after what she went through, her journey, certainly in Ireland, where the Irish are amazing and so heart and love filled. But if you, in those days, you stepped out of line, and forget it.
mm-hmm.
The emotional and verbal abuse was like, so she was using that power of her voice.
And that was your pride. That was your pride in the situation.
Well, and correcting it. Yeah. She was correcting it with humor.
Exactly.
So that's perfect.
But Maureen, that's a great point. Like, she was done with the shame.
Yeah.
She was done with the shame that she had carried for so long. And then knowing that what she did was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And like I said earlier, we would say that to my mom, like, I would say, I'm like, Mom, if you didn't do what you did, as painful as it was, you wouldn't have come here, you wouldn't have met Daddy, and you wouldn't have had us. And like, that was your destiny. I go, now I'm not trying to sound corny, but literally it was like, God was like, I know this is going to stink, but trust it, because you're going to be led to the greatest man in the world that's going to love you. And then you're going to have 4 more children that will worship the ground you walk on. And do whatever you need to do, and then leave this imprint on the world that she has. It's just, I know it sounds like it's so inflated, but it really, it's not. My parents were larger than life.
It's the tapestry.
It really is. 100%.
I use that all the time as a visual because, and it doesn't even mean that it's like a tapestry of rolling hills and beautiful trees and sunsets, and it's just colors of how we move in and out of life. And some of those threads are there because that's what's meant to be. That's our destiny. And you can change how the other colors work around it, but it's what was 100%. Laid out for us. Tom.
Just to tie it, and tapestry is a perfect word. So when we were writing the story, I originally started writing the story. I was going to do, each chapter was going to be one chapter about Peg, one chapter about Mary, and just have them juxtaposed and move throughout. And then after a couple of chapters, Mary's life, unfortunately, was pretty boring. There was nothing really exciting that was going to counter, so she had a normal childhood, she said. So I said, okay, that's not going to work. So then we told Peg's story, and then, and the whole thing about stories, and this is what this whole thing is about, is you had Peg telling me her story. And then when I interviewed Mary, Mary told me her story. But then there were certain parts that were not lining up and syncing up correctly. And this was coming out over months and years when Mary and Peg would have a drink at Shoreway's barn, and they would get together and sit on the back porch and they would share. Because if you think about it, when you're growing up and you have all the Christmas holidays and family gatherings, you share stories and everybody corrects everybody. No, it didn't happen that way. It didn't happen that way. Well, Peg didn't have anybody to correct or to verify her version of the story for 50 years. So she went into trauma and shock and did whatever she had to do to survive. And she told herself this narrative. Mary has a different narrative from where she grew up. And then when I got the actual documents, and that's where the historian in me comes out, the documents weren't lining up with either of their stories. So you said this truth always has 3 sides. And so that's when we consciously decided to tell all 3 sides. Mary's version, Peg's version, and then what the documents were saying. And that's what, the truth is somewhere in between all of that. And that's how the story, takes you through the second half of the book.
Yeah. As I started with earlier, the amount of research and all of those papers, I was thinking, how did you find this stuff? I know how that happens, and you have to read the book. But it's really phenomenal. Not everybody gets that opportunity to have that much information show up.
No, we were very lucky. And in fact, I remember it was August and I was struggling with this, something's missing, and then the file pops up and I have all these documents. And I remember laying them all out on the kitchen table and going over and over and then sharing with my wife. I'm like, something's not right here. Something's not right. And I had to write it all down chronologically. Wait a second. I go, uh-oh, we got a whole nother version of truth here. And that's what comes out,
Yeah, it's really fabulous. What would you recommend for anybody who wants to write their memoir? Because I know you started this, as you said, as a family project. This is something for you guys to pass down through the years so that there's a line through history showing what happened, how'd you all end up here with, and, but as you say, this just turned into something that actually is very poignant and timely in not only now in Ireland, obviously, but throughout the world and certainly in the United States. Like, a lot of this is all bubbling up. A lot of people are searching for their families. But how do you begin?
Yeah, I mean, you got to begin with just the truth as you know it. And you have to start writing it down for what you know. And then you start looking for, how do you branch off? Who could I talk to? So then I started talking to aunts and uncles. And then we still stay in touch with some of my wife's cousins in England. And they were telling me other stories. And then you just keep on putting the stories together. And then you try to bounce the stories off of different people to get their versions of that. And you just keep on writing. And it's a long process. I had a full-time job and, of course, a family and everything. And, it took 5 years to put this whole thing together. It was more of a labor of love. But, you have to just keep on asking the questions, keep on going back to the questions and just trying to get to the hard truth. And sometimes you run into a lot of dead ends and then you just got to leave it. Like the one part that, I regret, I wish I had Mick's version of the story, but he passed before we started writing this. So I knew some things that he had told me privately and other times that I was able to weave some of that stuff in, but I never got, the whole story from him and his perspective, which, is a piece that's missing, but you do the best you can. So that would be the whole thing is, try and do as much research on the topic and then try to put all the family stuff together. And then you got to follow the timeline. So, so then I started doing that research and I started finding out about all the other babies, the mother, daughter commission, the Magdalene laundries, which I didn't know about, all these other avenues that women had to go through. So it's really sad time of Irish history, but you do have these beautiful stories that do emerge from it. And that's why we told the story, to give people hope. Not every story definitely has a dead end, but it hopefully gives some people some hope that they could find their family story, because everybody's got them. Everybody has them, and everybody's got skeletons in the closet. So it's a matter of just, finding them out and trying to put them all together.
We can open that closet. And
that's right.
Clearing it out. It's true. It's so important to really do the work, because when we do the work, certainly if we don't want to look at our own skeletons, maybe looking at our parents, our grandparents, starting to try to just get some clarity around that, because it'll end up clearing our skeletons also. There are reasons we make choices. For myself, the reason why I made a choice when I got pregnant prior to marriage was different from the choice my mother made. And if I had known maybe her choice, maybe I wouldn't have done that. But
I agree with you. And I think that's what history is all about. If you learn from others, whether it be their triumphs, their mistakes, their stories, I think that empowers, the future generations. It empowers our children to share the stories and share the truth. The prior generations kept everything secret. You keep them in the closet. You don't want it, the shame or whatever. But I think that does more harm, because it doesn't teach the next generation of what they can do and how they learn and grow from that. And I think this openness that we have now with the internet, social media, with books, people telling, your podcast is wonderful with all these people sharing these stories, is a way to get it out. And I think it just arms people for the future and strengthens them.
Thank you. That's a profound statement on many levels, not only for this story, but for all stories that we have, and how getting back to basics, getting back to, to learning from our elders, even if they're not here, is so very important. So as we start to wrap up, what was your favorite part? And I'm going to start with whomever wants to. I won't do that to you. Your favorite part of this, favorite moment in this journey, the big moment. What was that big moment? I think I have an idea what it was, but.
I'll just start. The favorite moment, I guess, was we went to Shortway's Barn, and we had a podcast, and we had a film crew, and it hit the newspapers, And there was a line out the door in a snowy weather, and people were coming in March. We had bagpipers and everything. We got to tell the story. There were pints of Guinness flowing, and it was just a culmination of everything. And it was a celebration of Mick and Peg's lives. It was a celebration of Mary and Maggie and everybody coming together. The story is out there. There's no more shame. There's anything like that. And to see so much love and support. And we were just joking, like, since when does a sports bar have a book signing and it has its biggest crowd ever? But it just shows you that these stories really tug at the heartstrings of so many people, and these stories resonate with so many people. That was like a really proud, great moment, because it really is a celebration. And I think we have to celebrate these family stories and not hide them away. And I think we have to learn from them and grow and just share the love while you have this short amount of time on earth. So
that is wonderful. Wow. I wish I were there.
Well, that's why I love him. Exactly. That's why I love him. And, you know, I agree with my husband, because, to be honest, you know, like when he talked about, and not to be negative in any way, like, I don't know if my dad would have shared the story. I don't think he would have. Just like my mom kind of waited for him to pass. Like I said, respecting that time frame, you know, it is better for us, like, and our children are more accepting of it. Because my mom, when this came out, she was petrified that we would all think of her differently. She was petrified that the grandchildren would think she's what everybody called her in Ireland. So we have to respect that process, but truly we have to embrace our right and wrong decisions. And because they are making us who we are, and they do put us on the path that we may not see the joys or the benefits of it till later on in life, but we have to forgive ourselves 100% as we move and learn and teach and try to be better. And that's what this book is, because it was hard for me to work on this book. It was hard for me to read it. My husband was on it, and I did say to him, I know this is your book, but it's about my mother. And I felt very, very, very protective of her, because I knew how hard it was for her. But at the same time, the reception and everyone's love for it has been overwhelming. And that day in Shortways was beyond a tribute to my parents. And obviously my husband for putting this out there. And I'm so, so grateful for everything that he does. But that prideful moment was just overwhelming. That's all I kept saying is, like, what is happening? Oh my God. Every time I'm talking, this goes out. I think it's my mother talking to us too.
Yeah, probably.
100%. But it's that moment at Shortways, and Flavio Romeo, who put us on the podcast and initiated that whole thing, initiated the book signing, you know, and then having over 500 people come to just embrace this story. Again, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming and humbling every time.
And it is part of your giving back to the world by taking your mother's story and being of service, because that's what we're here for, is to be of service. So this is your service, your mitzvah, whatever you want to call it. Mary.
My favorite part was when I turned the corner. If I can get this out, when I turned the corner and saw her, you know, I as a mom, I thought, oh my God, she hasn't seen me in 50 years. And I was like, what would I feel? My kid was 18 months, and I thought, giving him away for better. I said, I don't know what I would have done. And then to look at her face and go, I just watched her face, and it went, oh my God. And not in an egocentric way. It was like, oh my God, she's here. You know, and I was like, it was unbelievable. And that makes it be selfishy a little bit, but to see her relaxed into her, this burden just left from her shoulder was unbelievable. And I'll always remember that. And then the 22 people that were standing there that actually came out, it was overwhelming. And my brother Patrick holding a purse. That was great. But that was my moment. And of course, Shortways was unbelievable. And the people that my family knows out here, they are family, and they've got 1,000 to 40,000 people that are family to them. And but when I saw her, that was it. That was it. That was the moment. I knew it was going to be okay for her and me. So,
and the acceptance, like you said, Mags, like the acceptance of all of our kids too. Like there was never a skip of like, well, who is that? It was like, oh, that's your Aunt Mary. They're like, oh, okay. Like it was literally that progressive, that smooth. Like my kids, being the younger ones, they don't remember life without her. They don't know life without her.
Right. I grew up with her kids.
Yeah. So, and all of them, but just the automatic acceptance, and me being in my niece's wedding, her daughter's wedding, and my mom walking down the aisle of her children's wedding. Like it's
Just, yep.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle.
Here. Thank you.
My kids are just, you mean I got more cousins? Yes. It just was crazy.
I know. It's
all with Mick and Peg. Started there.
It's the ping. They were the ping.
Yes.
The ping, the pebble in the water.
Yes.
And that you are the ripple. And the ripple is large and is meant to help so many. And so many women who are sitting there, even with the decision to, shall I even have this baby or not? Because of the judgment and the shame and the celebration of not having it, because that's what's celebrated in society. Now that's everybody's own path, decision, but, in honoring your mother, your mother and your mother-in-law, my mother, for stepping in it and standing strong and following their path. Because now, as I look at it, my kids have 4 other cousins, because my kids had no cousins, and they have my sister has 4 kids. I have 4 kids. It's a awesome thing. And I just will throw in that my Maggie, when my kids found out, when I went in and I tried to tell my kids, and I told my eldest, who had just started college, I said, I have to tell you, and I started crying. I said, I don't know who to talk to because nobody's home right now. And I need to tell you that grandma had a baby out of wedlock. And actually right prior to that, he's glued in front of the Yankee game. And this, and it was like probably bases loaded, whatever. And I'm like, crying. And he's looking back at me. He's looking at the TV, looking back at me. He goes, ugh. He goes, shuts the TV off. That never would happen. But I guess I really had that energy coming. He sits down. He goes, what's up, Mom? I go, your grandmother had a baby out of wedlock. And then he goes, really? Wow. Grandma's so cool.
Exactly.
And that was the energy I took for the rest of the time.
And ran with it
because our children are not as judgmental.
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
That's just so beautiful. And you guys are so beautiful. And I just love this conversation. I could talk for another 3 hours.
Me too.
Talking about this. It's like really a big.
We'll do a sequel. Maureen.
We'll do a sequel. I'll bring Ethna in because that'll help with this. So where can everybody find your book? Where can do you have a website?
We have a website, icalledhermary.com, no spaces. And then on Amazon, you can find I Called Her Mary, a memoir, is on Amazon as well.
Fabulous. And that can be purchased in overseas, in other countries?
Everywhere.
Canada?
Yeah, we have sales in 6 different countries, from Australia to the United Kingdom, England, Canada, and Europe. So it's doing pretty well. It's a little over a year now that's been out there. We're just so happy that so many people are enjoying this book and sharing their stories with us after they read the book.
It's empowering. It's very empowering, and it's very moving. And again, thank you.
Thank you for
this opportunity.
So much.
Oh, you're so welcome. And so to our listeners, this is how I end our show, is just if everybody could just take a moment, close your eyes, and take a deep breath in and hold it and let it go. And know that you're not alone here on the Family Balancing Act.